Hello, my friends. Today is Friday, February the 5th, and this is the 31st edition of Book Fun Friday. Welcome. So, as you know, it is February, and as I'm sure you also know, February is Black History Month. And so I'm going to devote my 4 book talks this month to books that are written by Black authors or feature Black characters or both. And so the first book I'm going to talk about this month is it's a children's picture book, and it is titled Pink and Say, and it's written by the author Patricia Polacco. I am so excited to talk to you all about and share this sweet book with you all today. So there's some backstory that you need to know about the author of this book. Patricia Polacco grew up in a multi-generational home, meaning she had older relatives who lived with them and her parents and her siblings all in one house. They were not wealthy at all. She talks about them not having a television, but what they did have, because they were this multi-generational home, were these experiences with older relatives who loved to tell stories. The author talks about her grandmother gathering everybody around and building a fire and making sure everybody has a snack, and then doing what she calls fire talk. And what her grandmother meant by fire talk was telling stories. Well, one of the stories that was told and handed down generation to generation is the story upon which this book is based. So the people in this book are based on real people, one of whom was the great-great-grandfather of the author of this book. So it's not just a picture book. It is an oral history recounting of the author's family. Now, to tell you a little bit about the book then, the people who are in the book, you heard me say the title was Pink and Say. Pink and Say are the 2 primary individuals about whom this story is told. Say is actually a nickname for a young man his name was Sheldon, and was around 15 years old when he was put in service for the Union Army during the American Civil War. Well, Say gets wounded. He's shot in the leg and collapses and spends about 2 or so days, by his account, lying there, waiting to be rescued, waiting to die, waiting for whatever's going to happen. Well, he is rescued. He is rescued by another Union soldier who goes by the nickname Pink. His name is Pinkus. And Pink is serving in what was called the colored regiment, or a colored regiment of the Union Army. So these 2 young men cross paths, and Pink decides to save Say's life. And he is able to do that because the particular battle where Say was injured occurred very near Pink's home. And so Pink is able to walk him, drag him, carry him to his home, and put him in the care of his mother. And between Pink and Pink's mother, they are able to nurse Say back to health. Say survives. And then all these generations later now, we get this story of what happened. And because he survived, we get this author who was able to write and share this book with us. I have to say a very special thank you to my friend Carol, who literally shared her copy of the book, but also shared this beautiful story with me. She used to share it with her high school ESL students who were studying American history and American Civil War, just to get a sort of a personal connection to that particular event in our history through this very specific story. Now, I mentioned that this is a children's picture book. Normally, I would read it in its entirety, but I can't do that without breaking down in tears. So I'm going to read a short selection inside the book. And before I do that, I also want to share the opening. This is the introduction to the story, so it gives the reader sort of a frame of reference around this story. Lets us know that these are real people. When Sheldon Russell Curtis, now that's Say, that's the great-great-grandfather of the author. When Sheldon Russell Curtis told the story to his daughter, Rosa, She kept every word in her heart and was to retell it many times over in her long lifetime. Sheldon had been injured in a fierce battle and was left for dead in a muddy, blood-soaked pasture somewhere in Georgia. He was a mere lad of 15. He lay there for 2 days by his reckoning, only to slip into unconsciousness and fever. He was rescued from this field by another lad who had also been separated from his company. I will tell it in his own words as nearly as I can. Okay, so this is the story of Pink and Say and Pink's mom. Now, Pink's mother is called Momo Bay, so you'll hear that name referenced here. For the next week, Momo Bay fed us up good. Raw milk and cornbread never tasted so good in all my born days. It were the first time in months my victuals didn't have any mealy worms in it. She saw to it that I tried to walk a little every day, so's that mean-looking leg don't go stiff on you and cripple up, she would say. This place wasn't that much different from our farmhouse in Ohio. More poor, maybe, but it smelled the same, like pine boards and good cooking. A mess of beans with salt pork, cornbread, greens, and onions. When we slept, she sat near us, stoked the fire, and watched over us. I never thought I'd feel safe enough to sleep deep again. My mother and Calo, my father, jumped a broom on this very spot, Pink said, as he walked me on my first day outdoors. And that there was the master's house, Master Ailey. Pink spoke quietly as he helped me along. How come you have his last name? I asked. Boy, when you owned, you ain't got no name of your own. Even Calo had to take that name. As we rested under the willow tree, Pink asked me about my family back home. I got one brother still at home to help run the place for Pa, I answered. What was your outfit again? Pink asked. He'd asked me before. Ohio 24th. I carried the staff. Wasn't supposed to carry a gun, but then so many died, even us boys had to carry, after so many were slaughtered like hogs. At least you got to carry, said Pink. In the 48th, we couldn't have guns at first. We fought with sticks and hammers and sledges. Can you imagine not trusting us with our own fight? I couldn't imagine such a thing. Then, when they did finally give us muskets, they were from the Mexican-American War. Those muskets jammed and misfired. Then how in God's name can you want to go back? Let me pause here real quick. In a previous conversation between Say and Pink, Pink had said that as soon as Say got better, they were going to go back and find their regiments and rejoin the war. And you get a real sense here that Say doesn't want to do that, because he asks him, how in God's name do you want to go back? And this is what Pink says to him. 'Cause it's my fight, Say. Ain't it yours too? If we don't fight, then who will? I had no answer for him, but God forgive me, I didn't ever want to go back. After a few more days, I could walk a little steadier, but still needed help. Pink took me out by the big house and walked me through it. Weren't much left of it, really. It was mostly burned out. Master Ailey had a library full of books. Right there, he said. He taught me to read, even though it was against the law. Well, he must have been a good man, I said. More bad than good, Say. Sometimes I think he just liked being read, too. There was this book of poetry, Say, that was this thick. Every night I'd read out loud to him from that book. I blessed this house because of all those beautiful books, but I cursed it too for what it stood for. We walked a bit further. To be born a slave is to be born in a heap of trouble. But after Ailey taught me to read, even though he owned my person, I knew that nobody ever could really own me. And he puts his arm around Pink. He says, "You feel hot, Pink. Lord, I think you're as sick as me. Let me fetch you back to the house." "Oh, I'll be fine, boy. Just a little tired, that's all. I'll be ready to fight, though. I'll be ready to fight." That night after we ate, Momo Bay came back to the table with a worn old Bible. She was so happy. My heart ached at the thought of telling her we'd be leaving soon. "Master Ailey showed him how paper talks," she said. "Show him, Pink." Pink took out a pair of spectacles from his pocket and opened the Bible to the Psalms of David and started to read. His voice was steady and had such wonder. Just hearing them words made pictures come into my head. "I surely do wish I could read," I announced to them, without thinking. When Pink saw I was ashamed, he took my hand. "I'll teach you, say. Some one day I'll teach you." I could feel my face flushing up. And then I spoke up. "I done something important," I announced. "Of course you have, child. Of course you have," his mother said. "I touched Mr. Lincoln's hand. It were near Washington. We were quartered there just before Bull Run. The president himself were shaking everyone's hands, and I just put my hand right out." "And he took it?" Pink asked. "Yep, he took it," I answered. "Now there's a sign, ain't it?" he said, smiling broadly. "Touch my hand, Pink. Now you can say you touched the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln." "Next best thing to touching him," Momo Bay said in wonder. Most of the next day, Pink was studying an old map. Marauders don't fan out further than 30 miles or so from their camps. If they come here, then their unit must be that close. We got to get south of the river. See here, say? That's where my troops were headed. We could meet up with them about here, I figure. "Meet up with who? You ain't leaving?" His mother's voice caught as she came upon us. "Now, Mother, you knew we couldn't stay here. You had to know that," he said as he tried to calm her. "No, no, my babies, my dear babies," she cried. She was inconsolable for a time. Then she sat still and afeared as she just listened. "Mother, this war has to be won, or this sickness that has taken the land will never stop." Pink always called slavery the sickness when he talked. "We have to go." He knelt at her feet. By the look that came into her eyes, she'd known that this day was coming. I could feel my breathing catch. My chest was heavy. My hands were sweating, and I felt sick at my stomach. I knew I had to tell Pink something. I just didn't know how. That night I couldn't sleep. "What's wrong, child?" Momo Bay said from her chair. "I don't want to go back," I blurted out. "I know, child," she said. "Of course you don't. You don't understand. I took up and run away from my unit. I was hit when I was running." I sobbed so hard my ribs hurt. "I'm a coward and a deserter." She looked at the fire and said nothing for the longest time. Then her voice covered my cries. "You ain't nothing of the kind. You a child. A child. Of course you're scared. Ain't nobody who ain't." "I'm not brave like Pink. I'm not brave." "Child, being brave don't mean you ain't afeared. Don't you know that? I don't want to die." "They's things worse than death, child. But you got nothing to fear. You're here now, and I'm hugging you up. You gonna be an old man someday. And then, when it's your time, the sweet Lord will send a hummingbird to fly your soul to heaven. Now, you ain't afeard of hummingbirds, are you? Her words brought me sweet sleep. That night I dreamt of hummingbirds and green pastures full of sunlight and wild flowers. I just want to show you this one illustration. You see how beautiful that is? That's Pink's mama. That's Momo Bay. And there she is hugging up on Say, who again is the great-great-grandfather of the author. Well, guys, thank you as always for watching. I do appreciate you sincerely. Happy February. Happy Black History Month. I hope you continue being well and continue taking care of yourselves. I will see you next Friday for edition 32 of Book Fun Friday. Bye.